Hello and welcome to today's lesson, 3D drawing for your model railway. Today's lesson I've got the test results from the print test that I produced yesterday. There's two versions. First was the version where we kept this as a rigid frame here, and then the second was printed as a bogey. Bonus points for anybody who spotted the issue with the bogey was the bogey pivot point is exactly where you'd want to have the centre axle. Yeah, unfortunately, the issue with having that there is obviously you can't then have the axle, and you can't really offset the pivot point because then it just doesn't work. There's not really enough space in here between each of these to have the pivot point. So that was one massive disadvantage with that. And when I did only have the two axles in here to test it, it did run really well. The issue was really is these ends particularly was a little bit too flexible and bent, so you could get around that by just putting some sort of bar across here to hold that steady. You could probably do the same at the other end to hold that end steady. And it did run well, but only with two axles. So if you wanted to go down the route of using that bogey, it does work. The other option was we had it as the rigid frame, and with the rigid frame, without the bogey on, it would go around corners absolutely fine. And I ran that all the way down to 9-inch radius corners, and that worked absolutely fine. As soon as you put the bogey on, you wouldn't be able to negotiate the corners, and that was a 10-inch corner and a 9-inch corner and 10.5, I think it was. Above that, it was fine, just about, but it ran better on all of the radiuses that I've got on my layouts without the center axle. I've got a picture here that I can show you. There's the initial test print, and this is the rigid frame version. You see that sitting on the layout with bogey in and the rigid frame, and there's a picture looking sideways with the center axle missing. So you can see at this sort of angle, and most viewing axles, you're not going to notice that center axle is missing. It's only when you get down really low and you start looking across the wagon that you can actually see there's a gap there on that center one. Now I found that this ran absolutely fine, all the way down to 9-inch radius corners. There was enough play within the axles and the pivot point on the bogey that it worked absolutely fine. So I'm personally going to go down the route of pursuing it with the rigid frame so that it looks realistic, especially when it's negotiating point work on the layout. You're not going to see another bogey pivoting. What I am going to do though is I'm going to draw a false wheel in this position here, just so there's something hanging down slightly. It's not going to touch the rail, but just hanging down enough that it looks like there is something there, and I could paint that black, and it will sort of mask the fact that there is that center axle missing. And I found personally that's the route I'm going to choose. If you want to go down the bogey route, doing a similar sort of thing, that's your choice. But from the testing, I will say that I just could not get all three axles and the bogey to work on the tighter radius corners. So yeah, it's your choice how you'd want to pursue that from now. Okay, so the other benefit of being able to have this as a rigid frame and a disadvantage with the bogey is going to be having the jacking points in here. If you have this front jacking point, you're not going to have enough room to pivot on between the edges here and the front of the buffer beam. And you're going to have similar issues where it's going to be starting to clash with the bogey here when it starts to pivot. So that's the reason why I'm going to pursue really going down this rigid frame. So in today's lesson, really what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by returning this back to the rigid frame setup, so we can then move forward from there, looking to add in on future lessons all that extra detail that I said about the jacking points underneath. Okay, so if we go to the chassis, we've got to make sure that we turn the radio button on, and then it changes all the history down here to match. And what we're going to do is just remove, not necessarily remove, because I'm not going to delete the work in case in future I want to return to this. So all I'm going to do is suppress all these features, and then we can then move forward back to how we were before. And then in future, if you wanted to go back and do work using the bogey, you've got all these details here. it's not like they're lost. You can then just continue from that point. And then these two here, I'm going to unsuppress these, and that should return that back to the rigid frame setup that we had. Where's that sketch from? Ah, yeah, unsuppress. Yeah, it is those two. Unsuppress those two. Okay, so there we are. We've got the back to the rigid frame. It's only a really short lesson to give you the sort of results of the test and returning this back to how it was. So nothing too spectacular. But hopefully that's now eliminated the need for you to need to worry about which option you're going to go down. I've given you the pros and cons of each, and the fact that I feel that this is going to be the better option for us to pursue going forwards. It's going to give us the cleaner results and the operation that we require. As I did say, that the one thing I was going to do was I'm going to add that centre axle in here. So again, I'm going to just go back in the history to before the mirror object of the whole of the chassis. It's that one. So if I roll the history back to here, come back in, I'm going to rotate this round, and then I'm just going to draw on this back surface a wheel that's not going to come down too far. So I'm going to use the centre point of the axle, and then you can see I'm just going to go, I don't know, maybe 4.5 millimeters. And if I'm using the 6.1 millimeter axle, you're going to see that you're going to have the hang down below, but it's not going to be touching the wheel. I'm just going to drag this inwards about a millimeter, give it a little bit of strength, tell it to be a join, and click on OK. And then we can jump the history back all the way to the very end. Now I'm using, I'm using resin up here that I don't have to use, but I'm just using it just to give it a little more strength. Okay, now if we look side on, you can see you've got that shape of a wheel there. If you paint that with a little bit of shadow, it will make that impression that there is actually a wheel in there, and just hide that glaring gap that we've got here. So that's what I'm going to do with today's lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've understood where we've got to in the decision processing that I've made and why I've chosen to go down this route. If you've got any comments, if you've tested it yourself and you found you've got different results, or you want to go down a different route, please leave a comment below. The more information we can gather as a community, the better it is for all of us, not just for myself, but for every one of us. So yeah, please leave a comment below. Please like and subscribe to the videos. Thanks for watching.